I don't like aesthetically on this is I don't like the difference between the centrals on the upper. So I feel like this whole side here is up too high and this side is down. I think it's more the shape of the tooth. So let's say I want to change that. I can just grab this last tool. This is my morphing tool. And you can, again, only do this when you're designing your own teeth. But now I can just drop that side down a little bit. Same thing with this bicuspid. I don't like how it's not shaped like the other side. So I'll just kind of round that down a little bit. Close this embrasure a little bit. And then now I can turn back on my virtual articulator and check the function to make sure I didn't mess anything up. And now I'm actually getting functioning there where I wasn't before. Another way that you can check your centric contacts and just your contacts at rest. So, have any of you used our software to design with carded teeth? Using, just designing a digital base with using existing denture teeth. Has anyone done that? Show of hands. No one? Okay. So when you do this with stock denture teeth, you can use this bullseye slider here at the very bottom right, and this will show you where you have overlaps. So the reason that this is important when you're doing carded teeth is because you have an overlap between two teeth. When you go to drop the teeth into the pockets, they won't go in the same way that they were designed. You'll have to adjust contacts in between. So this is a good way where you can see. So for instance, with the centrals here, I have a distal overlap and I have a mesial overlap between the teeth. If I saw one that said A, that's antagonist or opposing. So that's great for carded teeth, but if you're going to design your own teeth, this doesn't matter as much because there's gonna be a bridge connector that generates in between all the teeth. So if the contacts overlap a little bit, that's not a big deal. So I don't use that for these. I use the one above that. So that's your occlusal map. So does anyone have experience with our crown and bridge software, designing just regular crowns, right? So the occlusal map there is a color code that shows you distances to the opposing and adjacent teeth and things like that. Well, this one is actually a combination of two sliders from the crown and bridge software. The first is the occlusal map. The second is the collision lines. Does everyone know what collision lines are? So if you have an overlap between two objects in the crown and bridge software, it will put a red circle around the intersection areas on both objects. So this does both. So when I look at this, these green circles here, these are where my contacts are with the opposing teeth. And then there's color coding behind those that shows how far away the rest of the teeth are from those spots. So anything that's a dark red is going to be pretty much right in contact. And then as it gets lighter color outside of that, it's going to be further out of occlusion. So you can see the gradient scale. Anything that's outside of a millimeter, it's not even going to show color. So the green circles will show you where your contacts are. So for example, one of the teeth I was having a little bit of an issue getting any kind of function on was this molar right here. And I can see why, because it has no contact with the opposing tooth. So the easiest way to fix this is to go back to this tool here. And I'm just going to come to that tool, that tooth, right click on it, and bring it to contact with antagonist. And what we'll see is, see how it dropped down? So it just dropped down into occlusion. Now, it actually dropped into the proper occlusion because I didn't individually move that tooth from its initial position. It was just slightly out of occlusion. So I'm going to come over here to the other side where I was having that same issue. Bring the contact with the antagonist. Saw how it dropped down there. Now if I go and turn off, I'm going to turn off the color here and rerun my virtual articulator, and we're going to see more functional marking on that tooth. So we can see that now there. So, any questions on that?
Feature on the articulators generic to all of them, like the incisal pin
So yeah, it's meant to match the physical articulator. So for instance, we offer for our lab scanner, we offer what's called transfer plates. So the way that these work is you take whatever articulator you're using, as long as it matches one of the ones that's in our software. So like if you're using Stratus, you'll set it up as a Stratus in our calibration. There's cubes that come with them. So you'll mount those cubes on the articulator that you're mounting your cases on. You'll put those in the lab scanner, it'll calibrate to those. And then every time you mount on that articulator, you'll select that in the scanning software. And then it will automatically align the bite based off of the mounting. It automatically aligns the bite, and then it also automatically aligns it to the same position in the virtual articulator. So you don't have to adjust that position at all. And then the way that the virtual articulator is set up, it's set up to function identically to the way that the physical articulator does. So it should match the movements. So if you take that denture out and move it to the physical articulator and function it, you should see the same thing. Yeah. The only room for error with that process is if you're using a non-fixed incisal pin to mount. Because my idea of zero position on the line could be slightly different from your idea of zero position on the line, and that could affect the bite slightly. So that's the only room for error there. But a lot of companies offer a big solid incisal pin that you can screw on for mounting. If you use that, then it shouldn't be an issue.
What are this data is fluctuating in the column?
Sorry?
Changing data, constantly data is changing.
Oh yeah, that's so it's where it's running through the different functions. So it's so here, let me show you, because I have the other arch off. It's just continuously running through all the function. That's why those numbers are moving. Yeah, and you can do that. So those three green icons right there, the rightmost one is like a replay button. So if you turn that on and hit play, it'll just continuously keep running through over and over again. If I turn that off, it'll only do it one set on each function and then it'll stop.
Let's go over all this articulator function that is quick from the corner to the right side to all the way.
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to the column.
So
Yeah, the first one is.
So the first one is the do not use tool. Don't ever go in here.
Don't do that.
This thing does, this area does more damage to new users than any other function on this thing. So steer clear of that first icon. If you grab these and move these around and then lock it, it's locked for good. You can't go back to the original without creating a whole new case, re-importing scans, and starting from scratch. So always stay away from that particular icon. This icon here, this is your setup icon. So this is positioning it within the plane, making sure the teeth are in alignment in the virtual articulator. So if I show you, so it kind of sets the position of the arches inside. And then you can do your adjustments here. So if you adjusted, say, your Bennett right and left
If you go
degrees to 15, you transfer those in here.
It tells
and
you
then
whether there's issue with the distal and issue with the mesial.
Correct.
So right click it,
Where?
tooth,
What?
This one, right?
Once the numbers are
down,
right.
right click. No, you're doing left.
Yeah, I mean, if you have on the physical articulator
click the
the
tooth
wrong
first.
values, then it's going to transfer the wrong
Oh,
things here.
click here first.
And then this is your functional icon is what I
Okay.
call it.
Now
This
go
is
to
where
the
you
tool.
actually run through the movements on the
Click,
virtual
click,
articulator.
yeah, click,
and it,
right click on that.
shows you those blue markings.
Okay, bring
Okay.
me to
Now later
It's a
on, when we
contact,
get
yeah.
into the sculpt anatomy step, I'm going to show you the
I knew there was something.
ways that
So,
you can actually
see, this got
correlate
corrected,
the
so now you gotta
bite
correct
together.
this.
So where those functional marks are, you can actually go through, just like if you took on a physical articulator, you tapped it together, you ran it through function, and then you adjusted the bite paper spots, same thing. So and I'll show you that later on. You can't do it here. It's actually the step after you bridge things.
So how you can, do we have to fix certain parameter over here or just have to do us how that will work?
Well, yeah, I mean,
Degree, 15 degree would fit.
it depends on what you're given. So if you're given different values there, certainly enter those in, but if the values you're given are wrong, then it's going to be wrong here as well, because it's just transferring the information. Now, if you're using like a face bow mounting and things like that, you know, that's a whole different story. And, you know, you'll have to make sure you're using an articulator system that has a virtual face bow that matches and all that kind of stuff. That can get it a little more advanced. But if you're using that Coist transfer from Ivoclar, that's a lot easier to use because it's just entering those values at the beginning, and that sets it in that position inside the articulator for you. Relates it to the condyles, just like it would in the patient's mouth. It's not 100% because it's just a Coist transfer. It's not a full-blown face bow, but it gets you really, really close. And then, yeah, I mean, or using the transfer plates would be the only other option. So you can physically mount with a face bow and then scan those in on the lab scanner with the transfer plates, and then that would transfer that same face bow into the software.
In general, out of 100, 99 times we don't have this kind of data.
Yeah, I mean, you're typically most clinicians that are sending you denture cases are general dentists who don't do a lot of this stuff. You'll get those, a lot of times you'll get that kind of stuff from like prosthodontists or specialists, but typically not from GPs. And that's not saying that all GPs don't do it, it's saying most don't do it. Yeah. Most GPs, you're lucky if you get canine points marked on your wax rings. So, I mean, it just depends on the GP. Yeah, you pretty much get a midline, and that's sometimes iffy.
But
So if let's say like you had a breathing wall and you have to readjust, let's say 10 each time, you don't have to go all the way back. You just go to the occlusion.
Yeah, you would just come right back here, change the values, and re-articulate and see if.
Occlusion is back.
Yep. Now, if you had to remount the case and maybe the vertical was off, then you would want to start. Yeah, because most of the work that you did is wouldn't transfer to the new mount because it's yeah, because most from my experience, most of the time it's not just a straight up and down vertical issue. It's a lot of like this and this kind of stuff as well. So it's better to just start over because it's going to be really far off. Does anyone have any other questions about Smile Composer? Yeah.
Removing like taking the second molars out. Can you do that?
Yeah, you can do that. So a good example is here. So I can see, obviously, I don't know what's here, so I don't even know if I can do a denture tooth right here. So I'm going to take this lower molar out, just so there's no issue. Obviously, my base ends right here, so that tooth wouldn't work in the first place.
can you extend it?
I mean, in that sculpt step in the prepare area, I could have added a whole bunch of material back there, but there's no guarantee that it's accurate. So I would tend to just not. And this is also a try-in, so it's not a final denture, so there's no point in doing it.
Can you take off this last tooth?
Yep, that's what I'm getting ready to show.
Uh-huh.
So to do this, you have to be in the second tool from the right. And all you have to do is right click on the tooth that you want to remove. And you're going to get a couple options here. So remove this second molar is just going to remove the one you right clicked on. Remove all second molars is going to remove all the second molars. You can also do this from the second bicuspids as well. So I can either remove the one that I selected or all, so all the way around. So when I do the second molar, I'm going to go ahead and remove it. And it just removes it from the setup. So you don't have to do anything else. You don't have to back out, close the order, remove that tooth from the order form, and then go all the way back through. Just right click and remove that tooth.
What, do you want to add it back? Like you say, oops.
Just hit undo,
Okay, gotcha.
and that'll pull it right back. Yeah.
Quick question, if you wanted to add it back after you were 30 steps ahead, is there a way to do that?
You have to undo all the steps in between from when you did it. Yep. So I usually will go ahead and just set everything the way I want it, and then at the end I'll decide if I want to remove any teeth. Sure, there's going to be some maybe minor things that you're going to adjust. For example, if I were to remove these premolars, it's going to slide everything forward. So I'm not going to have to close that gap, but I am going to see that I have a gap right here and not one right here. So I'm probably also going to want to take this tooth and resize. But that's an easy undo because that was just two things. If you do it right off the bat and then make all these changes to your setup, you're going to end up having to go all the way back to the beginning of the setup, undo everything, have that tooth back in there, and then redo your whole setup, basically. So I always remove things at the very end before I'm going through. And you can see when I go down here to the undo button, so you'll notice that next to the undo button there's a drop down arrow right here. And what this is it's a listing in order of the last tools that you've used. So I can see the second one down there is remove all second premolars. So if I just click on that, it'll undo everything that I did after that and that step. So you don't have to sit there and just click the undo button over and over again until you get the tooth back.
For me, it's better to take off the second molar than the last molar.
I prefer to take off the last molar because the first molar has more biting surface on it than the last one. Now, my actual preference is to remove the second premolar because both molars have more biting surface. So I would more so go in here and remove all these and then let those molars slide forward because I have a larger biting surface there. And I could probably then just come in here and just slightly resize this side a little bit so that I'm not outside that boundary, and then I've got teeth as far back as I can
Which tool did you use? The group of anterior and 6 anterior and tilted buccal lingually?
get. This one here.
That one only.
Yep. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward now. Did everyone have a chance to play around with setting their teeth? It's okay. It's just to get used to the tools. You're not trying to make a perfect setup or anything like that right off the bat. So when we go next, we'll go into the, now we're going to do our waxing. So we're going to wax our gingiva. You'll probably get a few warnings like this. So what this warning is telling me is, let me move it out of the way a little bit. So here we can see these green lines. That's our gingiva margin on the tooth lining. So when it generates that gingiva automatically, it's going to generate right to this green line. What this is telling me is there should be a minimum distance from the scan to those green lines of 2 millimeters. That's what is ideal. That doesn't mean that you can't go forward. So I have 2 teeth here. And this is in FTI notation, so the numbers are a little off. But I have two teeth that are a little far or too close to the gingiva, that green line. So that's all it's telling me. I can either go ahead and fix those and go forward, or I can leave them because I'm designing my own teeth. It really doesn't matter because I'm actually going to adjust the undersides of the teeth a little bit and make space for gingiva. So I'm just going to say yes and go forward.
Was it saying that in a specific tooth? Or just
Yeah, it'll tell you the tooth numbers that are causing the issue. Now, one of the things that you'll notice here is that my outline is a little weird right here. And the reason that it's a little weird is because of where my blockout wax actually was. So when I initially set my outline, it was before I placed my blockout wax. So the software tried to move my outline forward to be outside the blockout wax, and it actually placed it across that area that I don't like to place things on. So I just need to adjust a few little areas. So I like to go around here and take a look and just make sure. Typically you'll only see this on cases that you've actually automatically blocked out like this. So everything looks good now. And then I have my base thickness that I need to set. So you need to know what the minimum thickness of the material that you're using is. So this is your gingiva based material. So you would obviously get that from Dentsply or the Lucitone materials. You would enter that in here, and then it would set that minimum thickness at that value. So you don't have to worry about it being too thin in any areas. The other advantage to doing the automatic blockout is let's say you didn't block this out, but you have this massive anterior undercut. You produce the denture. What are you going to do? You're going to take a handpiece and you're going to go inside of it. Well, that's going to thin out your base quite a bit. What this will do is it'll push the beginning of the base out to the outside of the blockout wax, and then it'll give you that minimum thickness outside of that, so you don't have to worry about the denture base being too thin. So when I generate it, it'll generate with the thickness outside of this pink wax, not inside of it. So the other things I can do, so I have my gingiva aesthetics options here. So there's 3 of them. You have your delicate, your natural, and your intense. They have different degrees of anatomy, different looks to them. It's really more of a personal preference as to which one you're going to use. You also have this 4th icon. So for most of you, this is probably grayed out. What this is for is that you can actually go into the control panel and set your own custom slider bars and save it. And then this drop-down menu will allow you to choose whatever settings you have. So if you don't like the ones that we have set up, go into the control panel, set ones the way you like them, name them whatever you want. So you can name like a baseline, an economy, and a premium. And then you can drop down this drop down here and you'll see those 3 options. Just choose the one you want and it'll automatically set the sliders where you have it instead of having to manually adjust them every time. And this is a new feature with 2021. So if you're on 2020, you wouldn't see this. I can choose one, and then if I drop down the custom settings here, I can see the default slider positions. So as I click through the different ones, I can see what the differences are, where the sliders are. I can even see my custom one that I created. So for instance, maybe I liked the intense, but I didn't like how tall the root eminence was. Maybe it was just too tall for me. So I created my own, adjusted that slider, and then I'll use that. So anytime, the self-intersection. So see how it gave me this here? And it said that it was through a self-intersection. That's when you get too close to those large triangles. So I need to lift this area up. And it's always a good idea when you're doing these, unlike what I did, I zoom out so I can see the whole arch, so that if that error comes up, as soon as I hit OK, I can see where it's flashing and go fix that spot. now you can see this is how my gingiva generated. Now, typically with most immediates, you're going to get a puffy looking gingiva because you don't have much space. You've got a lot of ridge that's still there. When you do your finals, you'll have less of this lumpiness through here and things like that.
Oh no, you
So,
can just ignore it.
this one I'll probably do quite a bit of sculpting to
Oh,
normally,
the tooth.
but my finals
touching
typically
the-
turn out a lot better.
You gotta raise all the teeth up. This can be touching.
So anytime you
all
want to
of them.
make changes, you want to
You
hit
can be
the
touching the bridge.
change the sliders and then hit the preview button again, and that adapts to your new slider positions and shows you the preview button. So I'm going to go next again and do my lower as well. So hit OK there. Make sure your
It's
gingiva
not
is
the
fully visible.
base, it's the teeth sinking in the
Yeah, so I see exactly.
You gotta raise the whole. Wait.
So I have to go back, right?
Yes,
How
let's
it's
go
going
back.
through. So you want
Go
to
back
adjust
here.
that area and try
Oh,
to
here,
fix
sorry,
that. That's
Smile
what's
Composer.
causing it.
So you gotta raise it up.
If you right click on them, please, you gotta get right on the point itself. So if that was the case, what probably the error was showing you is that it was outside. So that particular spline is this relief zone. So what that does is it adds extra spacer inside wherever you mark that. And since you put it outside the spline, that was probably why you were getting the error.
Denture with the holes, which allows me to convert it.
And the implants are fairly decent, so too.
And these are corrected, annulation actually. We'll see. We shall see.
So there you go. It was that spline that was causing it. So once you generate your gingiva bases and you're happy with kind of the way they look, you'll hit next again, and this will take us into our last few steps here. So the first step here, this is the one that I mentioned where we have to put connectors in between the teeth because they are all bridged together. So I'm going to turn off my scans and so I can just see the teeth there. And then I'm going to hit the preview button so you can see what the connectors actually look like.
Yeah.
These generate more automated than our crown and bridge connectors, so you're not positioning an outline on each individual tooth and then shrinking and sizing the inside. This is how they generate. So they're typically tucked down below the gingiva for the most part. Now, sometimes you'll see areas where they're out in front of the papillas, so you may have to do some additional sculpting or things to eliminate that a
Oh,
little.
this one?
So also the other thing that you're going to want to watch for here is if you set up multiple bridges, you're going to have to do this step for every single bridge that you've done. So if you do 3 bridges, you'll have to do this step 3 times. If you do 7 bridges, you'll have to do it 7 times, and so on. So I'm going to hit next here, and it'll take me now into my sculpt anatomy. So this step is really important. When I talked about how we could see the occlusion before and make sure we had contacts everywhere as we moved, since we were using a balanced occlusion, but we couldn't adjust it there. So this is actually the step where we can adjust our occlusion. And the nice thing about this is that it doesn't just adjust the upper, it adjusts the upper and the lower together. So I'm equilibrating both arches together, not just one to the other. So I'm going to bring back in the virtual articulator. Everything should still be aligned as long as I used it in the previous step. And then I'm going to go back right into the function area and I'm going to run it again.
Okay, all right.
So now I'm going to turn off my articulator so I can see a little bit better, and I'm going to run it. So there's my function. So let's say I want to equilibrate this a little bit. Here I can see I've got access to this Adapt Designs button here. So you have to put a value in the cut contact. So basically what this is going to do, based on the value that I have here, is when I hit the Adapt Designs, it's going to adjust the blue spots on both the upper and lower arch by 0.1. So it'll adjust the upper by 0.1 and the lower by 0.1. So it's a total of 0.2. So when you do this, you don't want to do this a lot, because what's going to happen, your articulator is going to start to drop from the 0 position and over close. So you only want to do this a couple times. That's why it's really important that you check these in the first step where we set the teeth to make sure it's close, and then you just do this a couple times and that will equilibrate everything together. So I'm going to adapt it once, and then I'm going to check it. So now I'm getting scuffing marks in a few more areas than what I had before. So I would be comfortable here stopping it now. So I'm going to go ahead and just make sure by checking the lower as well to see if I've got the occlusion I want. So I'm okay with this. Any minor adjustments I want to do, I could do physically or on a clinical level, or if you're printing